And I'm Shulamit.
And welcome to the Business Therapy Center Live.
Hi, Nicole. How you doing?
Good, good. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to be back at this again.
Mm,
Yeah.
I'm glad to.
So we always start with a check-in. So I invite you, even though I said, "How are you?" and you said, "Good, good."
Right.
Let's go back. Let's go back in again and see. Would you like to start, or would you prefer that I start?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay. So I'm going to take a moment to check in because, of course, there's the excitement and the jitters of
Yeah.
doing this. And I'm appreciating in this moment that I feel better than yesterday. I felt pretty crappy yesterday, health wise.
Mm.
And it's humid, and I can hear the birdies, and it's warm, and I love that kind of weather. So I'm feeling like pretty good in this moment,
Hmm.
which is nice to see, actually. It's nice to, like, oh, I actually feel kind of okay.
Hmm.
How about you?
Yeah. So definitely feeling a little out of breath. Of course, here comes the phone.
Oh, well.
Yeah, that's life. Um, Now I'm feeling nervous and anxious about the phone ringing because I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I should have put that out of this room before we started. But interruptions happen. So, feeling self compassion right now for not having everything perfect. It is very dreary here today, so trying to
Mm.
put as many lights on to kind of feel better. But I'm always excited to spend time with you. It always makes me happy. I love talking about this. And so I'm feeling a great appreciation just for the time this week and spend with each other to do this. And to
Mm.
whomever this may be reaching, you are someone I appreciate as well.
Yes. Yeah. And like imperfection is where it's at. Uh and here we are just living the imperfection like as a way of showing it's all right. Whatever happens happens.
Yeah, we're not
Yeah.
starting over. We don't go backwards.
No.
No.
So, some of the folks watching, and you too, Nicole, might remember that I'm writing a book on women entrepreneurship and mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Speak of like life happening, here's the weirdo coming to interfere with everything. She's going to walk on my keyboard in a minute. So I'm writing a book on women entrepreneurship and mental health that's based on interviews with women business owners and entrepreneurs. And I asked them all a series of questions. And we thought that we would ask one another these series of questions because I think it's valuable. You have you responded to them for the book, and I
Mm-hmm.
posted them in a blog. But we decided that it was important to be in conversation about these things as well. So that's where we'll start today.
Cool.
And so the first question is to introduce yourself in the context of your mental health story, what you do, and where you are.
Right. Okay. So the way I normally introduce myself is I'm Nicole Lewis Keeper, the business therapist. And there's more there. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I was a therapist for 18 years. I've done all kinds of clinical work from working with the military to, mental health, you name it. I've probably had some time doing it. But and what I do now is I work with small business owners and entrepreneurs to support them in understanding how childhood trauma may be impacting their business because
Mm.
trauma and entrepreneurship are connected in a very, very real way. Never thought about this journey. But my mental health story that's connected to this is that, growing up, I was a kid who was very sensitive. I had a learning difference, so I was always struggling in school. I also had a very complicated and sometimes abusive relationship with my parents. So I really was this kid who was super sensitive, very quiet most of the time.
Mm.
And people were still drawn to me. They still were drawn to me for support. I was always the friend, that listened to people's problems. Like that was always me. And I kept thinking like two things growing up. I really wish there was someone to be there for me, right?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And also, I wonder if I could make a living doing this. And so, as I started on my journey, understanding myself a little bit better, I had my own struggles with depression and anxiety early in adulthood, which I think a lot of times this is where we kind of are the rubber kind of hits the road for us when we start
Mm-hmm.
launching into adulthood. And so I struggled with clinical depression. I failed out of college because I could not attend my classes. My anxiety was so high that if I was late to a class, I would not go in because I couldn't fathom walking in front of the class to try and find a chair to sit in. It's very, very debilitating. And once I finally was able to see a therapist and get on some medication and begin to work through that, I slowly clawed my way back through and, graduated finally, got a master's degree. And this whole mental health journey has informed what I do. It's informed, how I live my life ever since. And, I think it's important for us to talk about the fact that, I didn't just pop into a therapist chair fully healed and ready to go. Like this was a long journey that is still
What?
going on.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
One of the teachers I really like, his name is Michael Stone. He's deceased now, but he was a psychologist who was also a meditation teacher. And he said in one of the trauma trainings I took with him that it's not that our wounds are healed, it's that we know how to be with our woundedness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the gift that we can offer others is company while they be with their own woundedness because we
Mm-hmm.
know how to be with woundedness.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so, we eventually heal, but we don't have to be, it's not like we come in as this perfect figure to help others become perfect in their mental health. That's not it at all.
No, perfection is not the goal for sure. And I think true healing happens when we can hold both of those ideas at the same time, that I am, able to help and support other people, but I'm also still on my journey. Like I'm
Yeah.
healing and I'm still got stuff. It's like that's where we can hold both is where the real healing happens because there's self-compassion available. The resistance to be perfect and to know that healing is linear and it ends. It doesn't. It's layered and it's ongoing forever. So
Well, it's healing. We are never
mhm,
healed. We are always healing. And the degree might vary. The
mhm,
emphasis, the amount of time, whatever. There are
mhm.
times when there's more and times when there's less, but it's always ing. It's always ongoing. Yeah.
Yes,
I like the
yes,
spiral image.
yeah. I like that one too. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So how about you?
I'm Shulamit Bearlev Tove. I'm the entrepreneur's therapist. You can call me Shula for short. And how my mental health journey relates to my business. Well, I never thought I would be a therapist actually. Although, ironically, when I started school, late teens, early 20s, when I went to university, I did start in a social work program. But I don't, this is kind of embarrassing to me. I don't actually remember what motivated me to do that, except that I knew that social work was political and I was a
Yeah.
political being, right? And so that was what, but I diverted, I became engaged in other activities and kind of took a time out and ended up in translation of all things. And I became injured in the translation because translation is typing.
Mm.
And so I had a typing injury and I had to do my own occupational rehab. And it was at that point that I was like, well, I guess I'll go back to where I started. And I had been working in personal growth and mental health. I was a yoga teacher and doing that on the side as a side hustle but I was still always earning a salary.
Mhm.
So it made sense to take that from out of the sidelines and back into the center. So
Mhm.
I went back and got a master's degree in counseling and spirituality and became a therapist and a registered social worker. Um, and I'm a survivor of trauma. I've experienced domestic violence. I've lived in poverty. I lived in a women's shelter. I've been sexually assaulted. These are things that impacted me as a human. So I was always, as a human, engaged in healing processes around these experiences.
Mhm.
So there's that. There's the master's degree. And then when I left school, you know, they don't teach us in school how to run a business. They give us the technical skills to do the profession. And I knew two things about business and money. One was that most small businesses fail in the first year. And the second one is according to Klontz and Klontz, who are two researchers in the US who do psychological peer reviewed research into money, the people who score most poorly on all their measures are, guess who?
Women.
Mental health professionals.
Mental health professionals. Okay.
Yeah. And that was just not going to be my story. Like, there was no way. So I leapt right away into business training.
Mm.
And it was in the context of the business training that I got to hang out with other entrepreneurs who were not therapists. I was the only therapist
Mm-hmm.
hanging out. And I observed what people went through, but I also observed my own emotional journey
Mm-hmm.
and how hard it is to be self-employed, how hard it is to run your own business, how hard it is on your mental health,
Yeah.
especially. And I often talk about the emotional roller coaster of entrepreneurship, right? It was clear that there was a call for someone to support, to provide that kind of support for entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the Entrepreneur's Therapist was born.
Yeah. Similar. Right. I just saw a lot of people doing a lot of harm in this industry. And I always thought to myself, why are all these PR and marketing people running these, personal development programs and talking about trauma? And I just thought that, gosh, I really wish that more therapists would get into this arena because it's needed to support entrepreneurs and business owners. So that's kind of how we met. So,
Yes,
which
I
was very
think Maggie
fortunate.
Patterson from Small Business Boss connected us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right.
So, in terms of just adding a little, taking this just a little bit further, I think both of us have alluded to this, but I'd like to hear from you why mental health or wellness matters to you.
It matters to me because it's part of the holistic experience of being human. And we have been socialized to think that they're very separate, um, whether it's mental health or physical health. And it's really holistic health. It is all of who you are. And so for me, I think that that is one of the reasons why, I think it matters. Um, is part of the re-education of what it means to be a human and to combine those two things, because there is no mental wellness or mental health without physical health and physical wellness, um, or vice versa. We're working on them at the same time, but it doesn't mean that you can have a physical challenge and not be mentally well. But we've been told that it's kind of very separate, and that you have to either pick one or the other, or put your finances or resources. In the United States, we have to put our money and resources in different buckets. And so I think when we can help people really understand, and what this has helped me understand, is that, seeing myself as a whole ass human is what a client of mine says. And knowing that everything's connected and that every part of me matters has been so important to my own healing journey, because it has allowed a lot of permission, a rejection of perfectionism. And yeah, so when I hear people talk about mental health, usually what they're talking about is a mental health diagnosis or some
Right.
pathological idea. And, I really feel like mental wellness is the goal, right? Because we're always pathologizing this process. And I think it puts people in a power dynamic where they feel like they have to be fixed by someone.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm articulating that well, but that's why it's important to me to have these conversations and to talk about this, because I think that personally, I believe that most of the diagnoses that are in the DSM-5 should say depression due to trauma, right?
Yeah.
Anxiety due to trauma, but we have put them in these silos that they have their own entity, and that they just happened out of nowhere because you have some skewed biology that's just your fault, So I don't know.
Right.
I'll get on a tangent about that, but
No, but I
think
think
that's
that's
why talking
important.
about it differently is important.
Yeah. I agree with you that the diagnoses show up as completely divorced from reality,
Mm-hmm.
completely divorced from context, completely isolated from what we're living. And, living as a whole ass human, giving ourselves space and permission is well, this is our show, so we can say what we want. It's a big old fuck you
Mm-hmm.
to white supremacy and patriarchy and consumerism and capitalism and all the harmful systems of oppression that want to extract from us and especially extract our humanity, because humans don't fit in those systems. We have to be dehumanized in
Yeah.
order to be of benefit to those systems. And the more human we are, the less we serve those systems. And it's political,
Hmm.
right? To take this conversation out of the domain of the medicalization of
Hmm.
mental health and out of the domain of diagnosis, pathology, and treatment.
Hmm.
And that was, in fact, in the introduction to my book, I write about this, that I wanted to expand the conversation because there is so much more to mental health than only diagnosis, pathology, treatment, and medicalization, right?
Hmm. It's just a medical model. There's no room for anything else. And there's so much more room when it comes things to do when it comes to cultivating that mental health.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's not about excluding that aspect. It's about there's that and more.
Hmm.
Because there is room, in my belief, I think we are in agreement about this, that there is an important room for understanding what's happening, which we could call diagnosis,
Hmm.
for being able to see patterns that occur and to make
Hmm.
sense of these patterns, which is also part of diagnosis, to identify what's helpful, which is part of treatment, and part of what might be helpful can be medication. So it's that's a one-dimensional story of mental health, and what why it matters so much to both of us is that we want the holistic, as you say. We want to include the whole of the mental health story.
Hmm.
So and in doing that, we humanize ourselves and others, but we also what's the word, our stigma busting. Because
Hmm.
if we say like mental health is part of, or mental health, mental illness is part of humanity, it's part of human experience, then it's not abnormal, it is not pathological, it's just is.
Yes. And I love the beauty of this as well is that so it doesn't put you in a position where you have to be fixed or treated. It is that this wellness idea is that you have so many tools available to you personally. Now, support's great, like we both support people, but you have so much available to you personally. Body wisdom, you can do, exercises every day. Like if you have to do some PT for your knee, like there's some PT exercises you can do, but there's also things that you can do to support yourself through this process that um, are beautiful, beautiful interventions that I don't think enough people talk about as well. So I love that the idea of this puts more of the power, the healing, the embodiment into the person, the identified patient's hands.
Yeah, I think what I like about what I'm expanding on what you say, because I'm appreciating it very much, is this idea that mental health happens by accident, and we only ever notice mental health when it's actually mental illness, and that we just kind of bumble along in life until bam, we're sick.
Hmm.
And really, that there's so, like, what how do we say, where attention goes energy flows?
Hmm.
Or we can also say, like, in terms of building neuronal pathways, neurons that fire together wire together, which
Hmm.
is a thing about habit building, but that's also how we build muscles too in the body, right? And the same, that like repeated practice and then increasing the load, that builds our muscles. The
Hmm.
same model applies to mental health, mental wellness,
Hmm.
where when we care for ourselves, when we care for our mental wellness, it becomes stronger and
Yeah,
serves us better.
I agree
And we
100%.
would, I mean, from a healthy point of view, all other things being equal, we would consider it a problem if somebody didn't eat their 3 meals a day,
Hmm.
or they didn't drink their 8 cups of water. I mean, again, within a context, right? We're
Hmm.
talking in a context of access. If a
Hmm.
person has access and they don't eat their 3 meals a day, it already, we're like, something's not right. Or a
Yeah.
person isn't drinking, we're like, something's not right. But people can go months and months and months without ever once having a formal opportunity to care for themselves emotionally, and we never think that that's like, it never even occurs to us that that's a problem.
Right, because we have been taught that it's not so, right? That that's not a thing to do. So
Yeah, yeah.
those
And
good
part
old
of
systems.
destigmatizing just puts it into the everyday for us.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. This is where one of those generational things is very interesting to me to watch.
Oh yeah, say more.
The level of stigma between, like I'm considered to be like the Gen X generation, and we did not do therapy. We did not, like, I was an anomaly because
Oh.
I wanted to work on my mental health. Like, it was not a thing. Like, you just don't do that. And now you see kids, coming up, they're like in this, like, I guess Gen Z, they're like all about the therapist, right? They're like, my therapist, my doctor, my coach, my
Oh.
my trainer, it's just, and I'm generalizing, but it's my experience. It's so encouraging to see that it is being embraced as a part of the whole. Yeah. And that
Right.
there's less stigma.
Yeah, like I'm entitled to support.
Yes. I love that. I'm like, I
Yeah.
love y'all. Go for it.
So I'm curious to know how you care for your mental health or mental wellness today.
Hmm. Some days are better than others. I think what
Right?
I've done, this will probably be a different answer than the last time we talked about this, is
Mm-hmm.
that this year I definitely had, or this past, I don't know, 8 months or so, I definitely had a resurgence, if you want to call it, of depression. Um, and I kept thinking it was post chemo brain, or pandemic burnout, or like whatever people call it. It's really trauma, but as you say. But anyway, I just kept making excuses for it. Right? Can't get out of bed, tired, doing the bare minimum, and I finally had a moment where I was like, what this is, and you remember this, because this is felt very much like in college, in that first time that I became
Oh.
really depressed and needed an intervention, because I had not been on mental health or antidepressants for almost 15 years. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
was
Mm-hmm.
very proud about all the work I had done, to support myself, to learn healthy habits, to care for my mental health. Um, and so I was really bummed, and I believe in medication. Do not get me wrong, but I was still bumping up against that. Do you really need it? Are we really that far now? And I decided, I think it was in February, to start taking Lexapro because it worked for me before. And I was still really ambivalent about it. So what I'm doing now is taking my medication every day, um, not rushing myself into my morning, because that is the time where I usually have the worst self-talk for me, is in the morning, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's when, because of all of the, and this is because growing up, going to school was traumatic. And so I had my biggest
Mm-hmm.
struggles in the morning about getting up and having to face that. Um, so that's what I'm doing, is, talking to people. I have a therapist now who is very special and specific to my niche and what I need, not just a generalist. So I have made, and this first part of this year, which is 2022, I have made my mental health and my physical health both a priority, and I'm doing so much better. Like, everything that felt like a chore to do 2 months ago, I can do daily, fine now. So that's what I'm saying. Like, this answer is going to be very different than what it was before, because I had to
Sure.
kind of have a come to me moment,
Yeah.
a come to me moment, and just,
Yeah.
recognize that, I had cancer and then 2 years of pandemic stuff. Come on, if you can't support yourself by giving yourself some Lexapro after all that, then you are just being an asshole to yourself. So that's what I'm doing right now,
Right. Yeah.
and it
Yeah,
works.
part of it, it's so like the waking up moment, right? They come again and again and again to, like, you're like, oh, oh, yeah. And
Hmm.
last Friday kind of had one of those waking up moments for myself. I was in a quarterly planning workshop, and the question in the workshop was, "What do you want from this?" And I said, it's been 14 months that I have been diagnosed with severe osteoarthritis and cartilage loss, and so I've been referred for hip replacement surgery, and I'm still waiting, and it's been put off twice. It was supposed to have been it was supposed to have been like around now, and now it's looking like October. And one of the ways that I was really hanging on was it's going to be May. It's going to be May. It's going to be May. So for 12, 14 months, I was hanging on with it's going to be May. And I mean, I know it's a house of cards, but it was still the house of cards that was holding me up. And when the card got knocked out, just everything fell down. And I wrote in the thing, in light of how the changing of surgery now has destroyed my Q3 and Q4. I can't do any of the things that I had planned because of the way the surgery falls out and the recovery period. Like I'm having depression, and I've been having depression, but I'm only now saying that I'm having depression. I've been having depression, I'm quite certain, since September last year, because I can't even walk now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my leg works, but I'm unable to bear weight, so I can't walk.
Right.
And like the holistic impact of that is just I'm honestly not doing well, like really not doing well, and a lot of the options that had been available to me aren't available to me. So I can't tolerate the medication for the pain, and I can't tolerate the antidepressant medication that I used to take, and that was the only one of all of them that I could take. So now I have no. So I'm just actually going to pause for a second, because this is really like, I can feel my lip trembling, and I can feel kind of like a tightness in my throat. And I'm saying hello to all this for the purpose of reorienting myself towards what I'm doing today. So I think it's the most important thing today is acknowledging the truth of the depression.
Mm-hmm.
And even as I say that, I feel the emotion come again. And in acknowledging the truth of the enormous difficulty, like it's just been the hip has been in a box, but I'm acknowledging now it's not the box, it's really the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And having freshly acknowledged that, like less than a week ago, so I'm just pausing. And remembering the things that I have been doing, in particular, sustainable compassion training, which is a meditation practice of giving and receiving love, and especially right now, receiving love, experiencing myself as floating in a field of care. And I'm doing that many, many times a day, which I'm a pretty failed meditator. I'm a really failed meditator in general, but the sustainable compassion training has been a real deliverance. And so I'm a much, quote unquote, better meditator now with that, even in my suffering. Mm-hmm. There's some beauty in the truth of how difficult things are, that there's a saying, practice like your hair's on fire. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of a gift in where I am, is that I'm at now able to do the meditation practice more. I'm journaling more. I'm following the moon cycles and paying attention to what's happening with the moon and using that as a prompt to connect with myself. I have a lot more peer support, formal, structured, scheduled peer support. I have therapy. Mm-hmm. And despite being unable, one of the biggest things I did was I overcame a big barrier I had to walking with a walker.
Right.
Walking for exercise with a walker. Mm-hmm. So, because where I live is very exposed, it's the country, it's a small town, it's a country road, it's open for, like, I can be seen, my rickety old self, this is my inner self-talk,
right.
Parading in front of everybody with this walker. It was very hard. It took me a long time to allow that to be and still go for a walk. And that happened last week. So I've been doing that. And it's interesting because the way I built up to that, like actually doing it, the talk is less present now that I'm actually doing it, which is an interesting. I thought it would get worse, but it's less prominent. So those are the kinds of things. And working less, I have to say that's an important thing. When I came back from 2 weeks, I took my annual leave, and my question coming back from that is, how little can I work and still have a viable business?
Hmm.
And that has to do with not client service, but the kind of work, like, and everybody knows who's in business for themselves. Outside of client work, most of what we do is self assigned.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
so I'm asking myself around my self assigned work, what is essential and nurturing to my business, and what's busy work? And so that's where the question comes, how little can I do and still have a viable business?
Hmm.
And I think that's an important, even though it looks like a business question, it's actually a mental health question. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, we were talking about building your business at your lowest capacity and letting that be the business model, basically,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's how you support yourself to thrive when you have extra capacity and not sink when you don't have it. And same. I had to pull back at the beginning of the year to just wait it out and let the support that I was putting in place, begin to work, and it did. So yeah. And I think it's important to note too that, I don't know about you, but when I was, actively a therapist, I used to get a lot of questions from people that would say, "Oh, I think it's weird if a therapist has a therapist," or that they're taking meds, or that they're
Oh my
saying, "I'm
gosh.
depressed and I'm helping you with your depression," right? And I think that that's also part of that stigma piece, is that we don't have to be perfect people to perfectly support other people. Like, it's just not, you can be a doctor who really helps people with migraines and still get migraines yourself. Like, it's just not needed. But we've just been taught to be just so binary about what is okay and what's not okay. So I love that we're having this conversation about our own mental health and depression at
Right.
this moment.
Well, sick and well, right? Sick
Mm-hmm.
means dysfunctional, can't, it's, you're done, you're toast, you're broken,
Mm-hmm.
sick. And well means you're perfect and have no problems. And you and I both have worked sick many, many times, sick in
Mm-hmm.
quotation marks, right?
Yeah.
Many times in our lives. And many therapists work sick. Many other people work sick in quotation marks, and do okay, do just fine by their
Mm-hmm.
clients. Yeah, but the thing is that the clients don't see it. It's not a forward facing unless you get to, like, hear from the person as a human being, and as people who support our clients, it's not about us, it's about them. And
Yeah.
so we share to a certain degree, but it's not the focus. And
Exactly.
so a person may not be it's not going to be in your face how we are when you work with us, because it's
Mm-hmm.
about you, not us.
Mm-hmm.
And similarly, I think there are many, many people in the world who we see, they're forward facing, but we have no clue on what's going on by. And it's not even about hiding. It's
Mm-hmm.
just about, like, kind of access, I guess, or appropriate
Mm-hmm.
boundaries in many cases, where uh, we don't have an intimate relationship with a person, so
Yep.
we're not privy to the intimate details of their life, right?
Mm-hmm.
But still, there's stuff there. We just don't see it.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things I recommend, when people always ask me, like, how do I find a therapist? What questions to ask? I don't know if you get this asked this a lot, but I do too.
Yeah.
And one of the answers I always say is, I ask them, are they in therapy or have they been in therapy?
Yeah.
I don't want to see a therapist that's not in therapy or has some kind of support, because to me it shows that they're not prioritizing themselves. And so I think that that's an important question to be able to ask someone. It's like, what is your support
Yeah. Yeah.
here? So, yeah.
I've recently written an article. I think it's I think it's 7 things to keep in mind when you're choosing a therapist. And their personal growth and development is an essential aspect to
Mm-hmm.
inquire about. I'll put the link to that in the
Oh,
comments
good.
after, like, when the live is over. I'll go and put that information there for people to consult. But yeah, that's a question of integrity for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that, you practice what you preach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I agree.
So, are there systemic or social factors that have had an impact on your mental health as an entrepreneur? And if so, how did you address them?
Um, let's see. Let me think about that question. I think that well, I was steeped in the systems of not validating people who learn differently, and
Mm-hmm.
being pushed
Mm-hmm.
through a school system, who expects everybody to learn the same way, be in class the same way, have the same goals, all that. So Being very steeped in that system, definitely impacted my sense of self growing up, my confidence, my feelings of whether I'm smart or stupid, and so I really, in my self worth was very, very low most of my young life and young adult life, because just completely steeped in the system that's saying you're the problem, not
Mm,
this
mm,
being the
mm-hmm,
problem, you're the problem,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
And so it was a great contributor to physical health of mine, and the depression, the anxiety, that it took me a long time to work through and overcome. My initial mental health journey, probably, but from the start of therapy and medication, probably lasted a good 8 years before I was really, really stable, and self-supporting, and doing good. um, and so again, that continued to work on me as far as being in the workplace, and not being able to adhere to very rigid schedules within the workplace, and as a therapist, initially working in really toxic, harmful
mm-hmm,
agency
mm-hmm.
work where we were not valued as human beings. We were just someone who could churn people through. I worked in a methadone clinic, so we were just
Oh
churning
yeah.
people through. So that system, did not value me as a human being, didn't value our clients as human beings. So it was very demoralizing, and very difficult to manage. And all of those factors have played into my career over my lifetime. And it's one of the reasons why I'm someone who would tend to leave jobs every 3 years and move somewhere else, because I found that my mental health would you know, start to be impacted, because everywhere I worked was still steeped in these patriarchal capitalistic structures that were not actually helping the people that we were supposed to be helping, including ourselves. And so that had an influence on me starting my business. I was very burnt out at about 18 years into my therapist journey, and I ended up leaving the field and working at home doing Mississippi Medicaid claims because
Mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm,
couldn't be in the world anymore. It was just too much for me. So it impacted everything. It impacted, whether I felt like I could stay in the field or not. It impacted my need to leave and try and regroup, and knowing that I still wanted to use my skill sets to help humans, and help people, support them in some way. And so all of that led to me starting my business and getting into the coaching industry. Um, and as I started my own business and started to really see what it means to count on yourself and to bet on yourself. Because when you start a business, you are
mm-hmm.
betting on yourself, right? I
You
always
sure
say it's a
are.
high dive into personal development, whether you want it or not, right? All your
Yeah.
shit comes up. And so all the stuff I thought that I had fixed came back, right? Because starting a business is also a crisis. And what do we do in crisis? We default, right, to old
Yeah.
patterns.
Yeah.
And so all of that impacted, my business. And granted, it's what has created the work I do today, so I don't regret it. But all of that came into my business with me: the self doubt, the lack of confidence, the feeling stupid or that I'm left behind, like I don't understand what's going on. Like all these people are able to just, whip up a Canva template, or, jump on a sales call, or create and create and create. And my brain doesn't work that way. So it was really difficult for me the first several years to start to piece out um, where my own trauma from being in these systems and my own childhood trauma was showing back up in my own business again. So it had a huge impact. But once I recognized it, and I saw that, my clients who were coming to me weren't coming to me because the mindset tricks that they were being taught weren't working for them, and they felt a lot of shame because of that. And we started to talk about the fact that they didn't have money mindset issues. They actually had trauma connected to their money. They had trauma connected
Mm-hmm.
to how they value themselves. And as we began to work through that, and I was doing my own work myself, um, I started to see, wow, this childhood trauma stuff is really directly impacted to the wealth and the health and wellness of the business owner and the entrepreneur specifically. And so once I was able to see that personally, I was using my business as a mechanism to re-abuse myself. I was,
Mm-hmm.
recreating those patterns.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all of my clinical skills kicked in. I'm like, okay, so the business is the abuser. I'm the person who's, I've created this. Who else did this? I created the dynamic, right? Because of all these systems that I have been steeped in, all of this trauma that I've experienced. It's my business. I don't want to do this. So I began to fix that by changing the relationship that I had with my business. And it's just since then, it has grown into doing this research about how trauma impacts entrepreneurship and shows up. So I have been on a healing journey for myself through my business, because I think that you can heal through your business if you
Oh,
know
yeah.
that that is possible.
Yeah.
So that's, it's been very, very integral into my entrepreneurial journey. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that when you know how your trauma is showing up in any domain, you can use that as fodder for your healing. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's especially powerful for entrepreneurs because as you teach, there are so many ways in which our trauma has led us to establish our business and how it shows up in our business. Like I I always knew that I did not like to be fucked with by others, that I wanted to be
Mm-hmm.
my own boss, that I did not like to be told what to do, that I valued autonomy very deeply. I value autonomy. But it was not until I encountered your work that I went, of course,
Mm-hmm.
the root of that is, being overpowered, and that I told myself that was never going to happen to me again. And so, that it's just like it was a revelation, and I'm really grateful for it. For me, the social and systemic factors, my story is kind of the flip side of yours, because while trauma is one social and systemic factor that has played a role in my life,
Mm-hmm.
um, and formed me as a person, and so therefore comes through in my business. Um, I want to talk a bit about how my privilege has benefited me. Those are
Mm-hmm.
the social and systemic factors that I see most prominently in my
Mm-hmm.
life. My access to stable food and shelter. Because I live in Canada, we have access to healthcare that is we pay for through our taxes, but you don't have to have it in your pocket to go get the care you need. Um, I'm white. I'm Jewish, but I'm white passing. You can't tell that I'm not white by looking at me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm I pass as heterosexual. I pass as straight, even though I am bisexual is the word that I would use to
Mm-hmm.
identify myself, and polyamorous as well. Um, but all the passing that I do, also body, like my gender conformity, my, I'm very tied to my sense of myself as a woman, but I also know that my presentation of my
Mm-hmm.
womanness is a benefit.
Yeah.
And how I appear in the male gaze is also a benefit. It has served me. The fact that I'm an extrovert in a culture that prefers extroversion has also served me very well. These are things that and this is like I feel uneasy saying this, but I really want to name it because I think it's really
Mm-hmm.
important. Is pretty privilege, the
Yeah.
privilege of being an attractive person, and how all the research shows that when you're attractive, when you're considered conventionally attractive, you're considered smarter, you're treated better, all that stuff, and I think it's important to name that
Mm-hmm.
as an because nobody ever talks about it, for one thing, except
Yeah.
Kimberly Dark, and that's where I learned about pretty privilege, was from Kimberly Dark, who wrote a book, Fat, Pretty, and Soon to Be Old, a series of essays, which I highly recommend, and I'll put that in the notes afterward, or in the comments afterwards. These are all things that have benefited me. Like, I can't quantify it,
Mm-hmm.
but when I see peers whose experiences are different from mine on any of those aspects of privilege, and I see what they struggle with, that's where I can see where my benefit is,
Mm-hmm.
by comparing myself to people who don't have the same privilege as I do.
Yeah.
Conversely, being a woman in a misogynist culture has what it takes to mediate that, right, detracts from the energy I have available for myself and other things.
Mm-hmm.
And so that has made things harder. And just one of the ways, for example, I tried to do my master's degree 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And the nature of the heterosexist relationships that I was in, and the fact that I got pregnant, and that my goals were not important in comparison to the male goals, right? That I was 46 before I started my master's for the third time and finally finished. Maybe it was before 46. I finished when I graduated when I was 48. But you see, if I had been treated the same way other boys of my age and generation, and even in my family, when I was 19, 20 and I wanted to go to graduate school, I could have gone to graduate school because the school would have found, what do you call those things? Fellowships, where you get paid to do your graduate studies and all that kind of stuff. My family would have made it a value, and they would have found the money for me to do that. So, the delay, I think I'm a much better therapist now that I'm much older in life and much more experienced. I think that I shudder to think of what the 19, 20-year-old me would have done unleashed on the world, or the 25-year-old me would have done unleashed on the world. But it's like it's a two sides of a dime, right? Because there is the part of me that's enormously frustrated and was held back by the fact of my experience of misogyny in the world, right? So that's why I'm late to this. And there is still a part of me that's frustrated, like it talks about all the lost time, and what I could have done with my life and where I would be now if only I had started earlier. So those are just some. Let me pause for a second. I think that's all I'm going to say for now about that. I think we both have so much more on that topic, but I'm also aware of the time.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about all the things.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So. For another day.
Yes. Well, it'll come up as we continue in conversation over our series of lives. So what's the main mental wellness tip that you found useful?
I think the main tip that I have found useful is understanding that as humans, we are wired for connection with other people. Like it's how we survive, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that we're very tempted to be told that we have to do something alone or on our own. And that I have found that even if it's just one other person, and even if it's your therapist, right? Even if there's a connection there, that is enough sometimes, right? To get the ball rolling for some healing. So I've tried to do this all kinds of ways by myself. I've had clients who tried to do it all themselves, right? And so I think the biggest tip is find your people if you can. Know that you don't have to do this yourself. And even if it doesn't work right away, to keep looking, because you deserve to have that connection. And it doesn't matter if you have to pay for it. It still matters. It still counts.
Yeah.
Even if it's a support group, it doesn't matter what form it comes in. If it makes you feel supported,
that's it.
You deserve that, and you don't have to quantify how it looks to other people.
Yeah. I think it's really important. This part of how you. This aspect you're bringing up is that it's idiosyncratic. We get to decide for ourselves what works for us, and if it works for us, then that's good enough. Right? We don't have to measure how we care for ourselves by some external standard. Like there's a lot of talk, about yoga, meditation, mindfulness, and if you don't do that, you're not taking care of yourself. Well, guess what? Those aren't panaceas. They don't work for everyone. And if it doesn't work for you, good on you. Find what works. Yes, I support that 100%. And I so appreciate the kind of, again, anti-capitalist or anti-oppressive message of that we are wired to be in relationship. It goes right against that whole idea of rugged individualism, and flies in the face of the popular wisdom when truly we do really need one another. And I appreciate that so much. It's such an act of resistance to help and be helped.
Yep.
Yeah. For me, the main mental wellness tip is this. You've seen me do it a couple of times in our live today, is to pause and say, oh, in shorthand, oh, that hurts. Or, oh, I noticed, right? Like you saw me noticing and going, oh, there it is. And to acknowledge, oh, that's how I'm feeling, and that's okay. To me, I call that self-compassion or self-kindness. what I have observed with clients and in my life too is there's what we're going through, the distress around what we're going through, and then there's what we do to ourselves about what we're going through. And that one little move of like, oh, ouch, and no wonder, ouch, of course, ouch, removes that upper layer of what we do to ourselves because the distress is enough. We don't need more, right? So that to me is the tip that helps me the most.
That's a good one.
Yeah, thank you. Is there, if there was just one thing you could share about mental wellness with women entrepreneurs, what would it be?
Just one thing. I would probably say the thing that I have found gets the most bang for the moment is to understand that you've been taught to disenfranchise yourself and your whole being as you go into your job or you start a business. And that is to remember that your emotional well-being is a part of your business well-being. And part of that is because I always say what works for you will work for you because everybody's trying to replicate models, right? It doesn't work that way. What works for you will work for you. What works for you will work for you. And to know that there are younger versions of you, like your 7-year-old, 10-year-old, 13-year-old, who have come with you into your business and have great influence on what happens there. So please, please, please get to know your younger versions. I call them your inner kiddos, and find out what it is that they want to do in your business and where they would very much like to not be involved, because that'll help you have more mental wellness as you are building out your business, because you will not be fighting the parts of yourself that don't want to be there. So that is the thing that I see is most impactful to people I work with, is to recognize that.
Right on. Yeah. If there was one thing I could share, I would say we are stronger with support. This is kind of repeating what you said, the main mental wellness tip. And truly it is, we are stronger with support. That's the one thing that I wish everybody could know, is that we're stronger with support. We're stronger when we support ourselves. We are stronger when we support one another. We are stronger when we receive support. We are stronger with support.
And you get to decide what that looks like.
Yes, you do. Yes, absolutely. The practice of that is nuanced, but the truth of it is clear. Yeah.
Very.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Nicole. I love when we do our lives. I feel so energized and so nourished and inspired spending time with you and listening to you talk about things about that we're both really passionate about.
Yeah, same.
Well, I'll see you again next time.
All right, see you.